Okay. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on this lovely day. We have a program this afternoon about the history of Clarks Summit based on a 1972 history that has recently been revised and updated. A brief commercial before we get started. I'm Sarah Piccini. I'm the Assistant Director here at the Lackawanna Historical Society. A couple other programs that we have coming up. Next Sunday at 2 p.m. we'll be having a gentleman come to speak about Dr. Charles Keeling, who is from Scranton, who is a climate scientist who created a model called the Keeling curve that is used to track carbon emissions and carbon density in the atmosphere. The weekend after that is our historic house tour. We do a preview party on Friday evening, June 23rd, and then the tour itself will be Sunday, June 25th. We have 6 houses in the hill that will be touring. Tickets for that are $25. There is a trolley that drives around. It's a good way to kind of go house shopping if you're interested, and learn a little bit more about the hill section itself and the neighborhood. A couple other programs on the table. There are copies of our newsletter listing some of our other upcoming programs as well. If you're interested in anything else, look at our website, our Facebook page, or just give us a call. With that, I will turn the program over to Dennis Martin, who will introduce the beginning of our program and our speakers. We'll be hearing from Dennis, from Warren Watkins, from Charlie Compass, and from Ellen Beachco. So please enjoy.
Thank you. I think I'll start by introducing our committee. I'm not the boss of the committee, I'm just the first speaker. We never really got around to having a boss, so it worked better that way. In front here we have Charlie Compass, who's one of our local historians, and he's the volunteer librarian at the Trolley Museum. He's also on the accessions committee here at the Historical Society, and he has one of the best postcard collections of the Abingtons I've ever seen. In the back we have Warren Watkins. Warren was also on our Centennial Committee, and Warren was honored a few years ago by the Abington Professional and Business Association for all the work he's done. Charlie and I are newcomers to the area. We've only been here about 30 years. Warren spent almost his whole life here. He is long-standing member of the fire company, a Rotarian. He's also in charge of the Clarks Green Cemetery, and everybody knows him. He's also was referred to as Mr. Clarks Summit at the ABPA recognition. The fourth member, Ellen Beachco, was also on our Centennial Planning Committee in 2011. Ellen is not a historian, but her claim to fame today is that she was the person who produced the first of the Viome books for the 75th anniversary of Clarks Summit, and she is also the one who spark-plugged doing the update on the book, and she produced the new updated version also. Each of these will have their chance to speak, but I will speak first because I'm going to introduce the book. My wife and family came here in '85, so we were just in time for the 75th anniversary of the borough, Clarks Summit Borough, in '86. Had a great parade, lots of nice souvenirs, but the best souvenir probably was Clarks Summit: A Narrative by the Viomes. Helen and John Viome. I did not know the Viomes. Ellen did, and she may say something about them. But I consider it to be the best souvenir from the 75th because it tells the whole history of Clarks Summit and what Clarks Summit was like 30 years ago. And when Ellen called me up and said they were thinking about redoing the book, and would I be interested in being one of the people who worked on it, I was tremendously pleased because I think so highly of the book. First thing we had to do was to take it apart, run it through a optical scanner, do character recognition, and it wasn't that hard because the original book, as soon as you opened it, it fell apart. Not like the new book. The new book is much better. We couldn't use the photographs, the pictures in the book, because they just did not reproduce well. However, with Charlie's card collection and with all the other pictures we had no trouble getting a whole book full of pictures. And we got a supplemental grant. Our original grant was on the Viome Foundation from Honesdale, but we got a supplemental grant from the county, which we were able to hire a Shirley Egan, who is a artist, and she sketched about a dozen pictures of Clark Summit, which are also in the book. So this book is complete as of a year ago, and we think everybody who's new to the area, or even people who have been here for a while, would probably find it tremendously interesting. Okay. The book itself, and this is what the new book looks like, essentially is in three parts. The first part is the early history of the area, going back to William Clark. Even though he was in Clark's Green, that's where we always start the history of Clark Summit, because that was the first settlement in the Abingtons. That section, we were asked by John Viome, the son of the authors, to not change his parents' words. That section possibly might have been extensively revised, even though they did phenomenal research, and they did it here. The library here has a tremendous quantity of old books, 1800s books about the area, history of the area, and they went through every one of them. If you know those books, you can see where they got some of the information and where the information differed, where they made decisions on which one of the stories was the one that they would put in their book. For example, William Clark was reputed to come to the area for the first time over about a 5-year period. Not easy to do things for the first time over a 5-year period. But also there's some question about whether he came with his 2 eldest sons or his 3 eldest sons. And again, that's not something which is negotiable.
Where did he come from?
Pardon?
Where did he come from?
He came from Plainfield, Connecticut. He originally was from East Greenwich, Rhode Island. After he married, he moved to Plainfield, Connecticut, had a farm there. And then later on, after he had 6 sons, he decided that he needed to go to a place that had more free land so his sons could get their own farms. Okay. But he came in 1899, with his 1799, with his 2 sons, 2 eldest sons, Jeremiah and William Jr., and went back the following winter to pick up the rest of his family, which at that time had 1 extra daughter. 2 daughters were born in Clark's Green. But when we did the Clark Summit Centennial, the 3 of us who were historians on the committee, Charlie, Warren, and myself, couldn't have done a lot better in terms of the history of Clark Summit than the Viomes did. But since then, basically due to a lot of the material that's available here in the non-book part of the Lackawanna Historical Society collection, we're able to zero in on the history of William Clark much better. So instead of being exactly sure when he went, when he came, and what he did, which the Viome book makes it look true, now we're not sure. So that's an advancement when you're a historian. The book, as I said, has 3 parts. The first one being the older part, the second one being what Clark Summit was like 30 years ago, and the third part being the update. They're all about the same size. Every word that the Viomes put in is in their books. I mean, if you buy the revised copy, you'll get a complete copy of the original, and then half again as much material, which is the update. And we were very happy to do it. It took us over a year, but as of a year ago, when it was published, we thought it was accurate. But that's as far as I'm going to go because the people here, Charlie, do you want to go next?
Fine.
Fine. People who are here had individual parts that they really want to talk about. Charlie.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm born and bred in Lackawanna County, but I'm in Clark Summit I for the last 30 years also, which has been a very nice town to live in, and I appreciate living there. My interest is a little different shades than Dennis. I'm interested in the businesses, what made things click, how things grew. So I look at things from that point of view. I look at the why, the how, the where. And sometimes I look at the who, because sometimes there's an entrepreneur in the background. But Clark Summit is like the stepson of Clark's Green. Clark's Green was growing up on top of the hill, and down the hill was the area that became Clark's Green. It was, some farms were there, but it was a wet area. It was hilly, so it wasn't too conducive for farming. But our entrepreneurs down in Scranton were producing these things, and they had to go to a market. And to get the Scranton brothers to get their coal, get their steel, somewhere to sell them, they were looking to move it. And the way to move it at the time in 1850, was a railroad. So the best way out of Scranton was unfortunately up hills, both directions. And coming our way, they had to go up a hill, which became Clark's Summit, but they didn't call it that name at the time. So they picked the best route to come up to where Clark Summit is now, because it's the highest point, if you look at their railroad system, from there all the way to Grace Bend, the highest point is in Clark Summit. So up there, they thought they would build a station. And at that time, engines were small, so they had to have engines pushing trains up the grade to Clark Summit. So when they got to that area, they built a big yard, because they would have trains coming up, they would have pusher engines coming up, and when they got to Clark Summit's summit area, they would cut them off. And then from that point on, they didn't need the extra engines to go further. So, and from that, Clark Summit started to grow. They put a station, they put a big yard area for what they needed to collect the fuel, run off the cars, add more cars. So Clark Summit, if you look at Clark Summit's growth, on this map here in 1873, we have summit areas. We have Waverly. You can see it's pretty big for 1873. Clark's Green is growing, and Clark Summit is tiny. All it really has here is a railroad station, a couple hotels, and a couple homes. So in 1850s, that's pretty much what Clark Summit was. And then it started to grow. Coming down, people from Factoryville built a turnpike, the Factoryville and Abington Turnpike. Coming up from Scranton, they built another turnpike, the Providence and Great Bend, the Providence and Abington Turnpike. So Clark Summit's area start to become a coalescence of things. It had toll roads coming down, toll roads coming up. It had the railroads, and a town started to grow. What kind of businesses? We had hotels, see a couple saloons there, a lot of homes, mills. It started to be a congregation area for farmers. Farmers started to bring their produce in. They had grinding mills in Clark Summit. It had farmer supply stores. So that's how Clark Summit started, as a central area for people to come together to get on the train. So the next biggie, I guess, at the time was, let me see, that would be, also in 1893, I found Lackawanna County City Directory, and it had, for Clark Summit, it had 95 people's names listed. And they would tell you the name and tell you what kind of job they had. And 30 of the 95 were all related to the railroad. So that showed you impact of the railroad in Clark Summit's growth. But the rest were a congregation. There were hotel keepers, blacksmiths, butchers. So you could see That's how town grows. It starts to grow for supplying the people that are congregating there. So, a little quickie. Census, 1880, Clark's Green, 207 people, because that was more developed. Clark Summit, 1880, 91 people. So it wasn't a biggie at the time of 1880. So the next big event was the trolley coming in. The entrepreneurs said, well, we're going to push a trolley up through that way, go through Clark Summit, and go beyond up to Montrose. And when they did that, they developed a system to bring more people out of Lackawanna Valley. Lackawanna Valley at the time was what? Coal, industries. It was kind of an industrial area. People are looking to go somewhere else for clean air, live better. And at this time, 1907, when they put the trolley through, they also did something else for the Abingtons. The trolleys brought electricity to Clark Summit. Before then, there was no electricity. People, I guess, would follow the sun, go to bed at night, or have the oil lamps. But that was another little jolt to the Clark Summit area. It brought electricity to the Abingtons, Clark Summit, Clark's Green, Glenburn, up and down, Chinchilla. So that was a very big impact to Clark Summit, because following up on that, land entrepreneurs started to sell land there. So you could see the several developments of land, people selling properties to bring people up to Clark Summit area. So that was another boost to the economy. And as you keep boosting the economy, you keep boosting the businesses that are going to support them. You know, you start to see funeral homes, barbershops, more hotels. And after that, the next big boost after the trolley came in 1907 was the cutoff. The railroad tried to cut down the height of what they're pushing their trains up the grade to Clark Summit. So they cut down 30 feet, and they pushed their lines out to become like the Nicholson Bridge and such. So that was a 3-year time of Clark Summit where it was just busting with people. More hotels. We had 4 hotels at the time. People were renting out rooms, again, a couple more saloons for the workers, more food stores. It's just a whole gamut of things expanding. So 1915, that ended because the train elevation was dropped. Oh, also the train depot burned down and they moved it to a new spot, which is another story. But so then what's the next biggie in Clark Summit's history? We have 1880 census. No, the 1920 census. This is after the impact of the trolley, the impact of all the new people. Clark's Green, 350, didn't grow too much. Clark Summit, down the bottom of the hill, it was 1,404 people. It tripled in what, a couple decades. So you could see the push to Clark Summit. Clark Summit is starting to become the center of the Abingtons. That was the spot to go to for shopping, the spot to go to for whatever. Also, the trolley company built an amusement park in Clark Summit, which always attracted people. So all these things helped generate the growth of Clark Summit. And what was the next big event? Dig. Next big thing was the sewers came in the late 40s, 50s. Once the sewer system was put in, that attracted more and more people because, you didn't have to deal with the problems of sewage on your system. It made it better for housing development. So a lot of developers went and even expanded some of the developments within and around the periphery of Clark Summit. So Clark Summit really is a name of a place, but it's really like the hub of the Abington. So sometimes people don't know where Clark Summit's borders stop and South Abington starts or whatever. So which is a good way, it's greater Clark Summit, which I think is very positive. So I brought a couple things for, we're moving on a little bit further in time to Warren's era. Warren grew up in Clark Summit, and I brought these to show people if they want to look at them later. This is a map put out by, in 1990, welcome to the Abingtons and Clark Summits here. And if you look at it, a lot of the businesses here have really changed. So businesses are like an evolution. Some go, some come back, they change. And you can really look at this and see who's gone, who's new. Same with any other area in Lackawanna County. It's an evolving business environment. And in 2000, the local Rotary put out this game, Abington Rotopedy. Rotopoly. Anyhow, however it's pronounced. In here, this is 2000. I can look at all the businesses that they have here, and these are also evolved. Many have changed, many are new. So, I guess to summarize, Clark Summit is a vibrant area. Businesses come, businesses grow, but its growth is up. Our last census, I think, is 5,000 something now for Clark Summit. So, really a big change from 91 people back in 1880. And here is a map of 1930s. If you want to look at it, you could look at the businesses here, what's here and what's not here. And I find maps interesting just because of that. So, if we're entertaining questions, I'll take any. Otherwise we'll move to our next person. Yes?
What was Waverly first settled?
Waverly's an early one. It was settled, 1810 or something? 15? Waverly's growth.
Waverly, 1802.
02?
That's when John Miller got there.
Mm-hmm. But as you can see, what Waverly is,
Clark's kind of got there first.
Waverly was well developed by this time compared to some of the other towns. Because of that growth, they were looking to put the rail line through there first, but it wouldn't work because of the elevations of the train would have to do. So now it's really a quiet area. It's downtown burned down, in the 1920s. Okay. Yes, sir.
In relation to present-day Clark Summit,
Mm-hmm.
where was this railroad terminus building located?
It's still there. It's, do you know West Grove Street?
Yeah?
Do you know Bedford Street?
No, I don't.
Well, if you go over the bridge, it's Bedford Street's the first one to the right.
Okay, by the foundry there.
And there's a high-rise there, and it's right behind it.
Likewise, okay.
Behind the high-rise.
And the building still exists?
That's the second station.
That's the one they built after the first one burned on the other side of town.
The senior housing? Yeah.
Behind that.
McDade.
Behind that. It's not a date anymore.
The first station was where Garrity's is.
Yeah. Actually, that one you're talking about on Bedford Street, when they first built it, all the property was level. You could walk to it this way, walk to it that way. And then they dropped the track in 1915. They dropped it down 30 feet. So they had steps that went down to the track to get on the train. It's very interesting. We have pictures of that. Anything else? Okay, Warren, are you ready?
I was going to go next.
Okay.
If I don't go now, I won't have anything to say. Everybody's saying.
Well, welcome, Ellen.
Thank you. Well, I look at back at my part of this, how this book came about. And in the 70s, I owned an advertising agency, and Mr. Viome contacted us. He was a friend of my associate, Mark Conrad, through the Rotary, and asked if we could put this history book together for him. And at that time, he funded the book himself, and it was still available through the library for a nominal price. I think it was like $10. And with the way technology was then in how you put something together was the old cut and paste method. And today, with modern topography and so much can happen, even to get a third of more information in a book that's just about the size as it started out is because of, if you looked at the old, this is a graphic artist view. If you looked at the first book, you would see a lot of holes in the copy. That's like the words were spread out because they wanted to make them justified. Well, today with typography, you can do that, but nobody really notices it to their naked eye. So it was my job to give the book an update, to make it easier to read by changing the color of the paper, and that's sort of after I got started with the book. In the beginning, people knew I was involved with putting the book together. And maybe even 10 or 15 years later, they would still ask me, Ellen, is this book, this book still available? I said, no, I might have a couple copies in my basement, but they are falling apart, I tried to put the good boundary on there, Charlie kept on telling me, make sure the book doesn't fall apart. So I'm thinking, if so many people were interested in it, how could I possibly create this again and update it? So the first thing that came to my mind is, I knew the Viomes were passed away, but I had no idea that they had a foundation. I started looking into other foundations to fund it through the library and through a nonprofit organization. So in order to get the funding for the book, you had to be a nonprofit. So I went to Lee Rudolph, our library director, and she helped me put the grant together. And we did get a $10,000 grant to put this book together and print it. So it became a win-win situation because all the money that you or anyone purchases the book goes directly back to the library. There was like no other costs involved. I mean, there were costs in printing, but we also used a printer that was a Clark Summit printing company that was 125 years old. So everybody had a loyalty to this book, and pleased to be put a part of it. And then my next, through Lee, my next thing was, how am I going to put together? I'm a graphic artist. I can't even write a grocery list. It's like, give me a picture. That's all I need. And she suggested Dennis, Charlie Compass, Warren, the walking encyclopedia of Clark Summit. And so it was like a gift. I mean, they were so willing to do this and so proud of being involved that it really was a gift to be part of it. So with that said, I hope we're all around 25 years from now, maybe, Dennis?
Warren will still be around.
To update it, and then it'll be 3 times the size. So thanks.
Ladies before John. First of all, thank you very much for inviting us to be here today. This could be a long afternoon if we all started talking about parts of this book that are so important to us as individuals. But we won't bore you with that. There's a lot of stories that come out of it. And when I tried to determine what area of the book itself I'd like to touch upon, it came to me the other day in the Scranton Times on the headline that said, Abington Heights to strike again. And I thought, well, here we go again, the strike. I thought maybe you'd like to know a little bit about education, what it was like back when Clark Summit was first formed in terms of education. Reading what I have about it, it was very important that the children be educated. And you remember that in those days, there weren't that many people. There was, 207 in Clark's Green, and there was 91 people in Clark Summit. But they all had to have children somewhere within their families, and they had to be educated. So their education really started, if you look at it, pre-Civil War, when they first began working with no curriculum, no teachers that had college educations. It had to be difficult. But they saw it as a need to educate their kids. So back in 1880, when I mentioned those facts of 207 and set 91 people, they began to work on their educational system. And in 1886, they purchased some property called Glenburn Road. If you know Clark's Green, that's in Glenburn. It's up along where the Clark's Green Church is, and it's an old section of the town. The third house on the right-hand side was where they started their first school. Two-room schoolhouse. I always thought you had a one-room schoolhouse, but this had two rooms, and upstairs and downstairs. But they didn't have a division at all as far as grading is concerned. You're all lumped into one classroom and receive teaching. I might mention that building is still in Clark's Green. It's still not functioning as a school. It's a residence, and an individual took it over, refurbished it. It's a beautiful home. And if you ever go up Glenburn Road, it's the third house on the right-hand side in the second block. It's interesting what they taught the kids when they came. There weren't that many of them initially. If they had 8 children who came to be educated, that was a lot. But they taught, I remember, reading. They taught numbers, which would be mathematics. They taught spelling, and they taught writing. Those were the 4 avenues of education that they taught the children. That school continued for quite a while until, I think it was in 1893 that they decided to move down on East Grove Street, where the school today, the administrative building, used to be a high school. That's where they went and built their little school, again, a 2-room school house again, but it was a graded school whereby if you were in first grade, you went to first grade, you were in third grade, you went to third grade, and so on and forth, up to 12. I think they had the first time they went there, they had 25 students. Interesting. How would you like to teach 25 kids? You had to teach them all the curriculum that was specified. It must have been difficult for the teachers. That school was in 1893, and 1895 was struck by lightning and burned to the ground. And that would be delight for any students. The school's burned down, I don't have to go to school anymore. But that wasn't the way the people saw it. They wanted to get their kids educated. So they transferred them around town in the hotel, probably in the Masonic Temple Hall, church, wherever else they could find room to put their children to continue to be educated. And while this was going on, they worked on another school, building it in the same spot with the one that was hit by lightning, and that was in 1897. That school was built, and it was open, and again, the enrollment started to increase because the town started to grow, which was understandable. Oddly enough, in 1908, it burned down. Second time, they lost the school. And I don't know how they ever put up with all of that, but they decided they were going to plod along and get their kids educated. So again, they had to farm them out all over Clark Summit and Clark's Green, different places to get educated. So in 1910, I guess it was, finally, they built another school on that spot. And that one stayed. It didn't burn down, didn't get hit by lightning at all. And the kids got a good education. In 1916, the school district combined between Clark Summit and Clark's Green. Until then, they'd been kind of divided. They didn't work. They worked together, but not the way most of the mergers would be working together. And so they started a 4-year high school and had curriculum for 9, 10, 11, and 12. And I can remember reading what the kids had to learn. They had to learn geometry. They had to learn botany. I think I remember Latin, algebra, philosophy, I mean, some of the things that even when I went to school, I'd bypass those because they were very difficult. But they were teaching it back in 1916 in Clark Summit, teaching their kids. Enrollment increased. They combined a high school and elementary school together because now they had more kids that maybe were from 9 to 12 years of age versus the elementary. So now they got a segregated and graded school system, which it took a long time to get there. When they started in 1886, now we're talking about 1929. They saw a need to build another school away from where they had the present school because Clark Summit, and we was talking about the railroad, Clark Summit's divided by a railroad. Some people divided by a river. We were divided by a railroad. And that one section over in the far end was called Sport Hill. It had its own name, just like West Side, North Side, East Side, Scranton, so forth. That was Sport Hill. But they needed a school over there because these kids were, there's quite a few of them. So they built the Division Street School. First time they built a school that was away from the mother school. Later on, and I maybe get ahead of myself, but there was a school in Glenburn, which came under the arm of the Clark Summit, Clark's Green School District. That took care of the ones down toward Glenburn Pond and then in that area there. Time went on and they added to the current Grove Street School, put a nice gymnasium on there, added extra classrooms, and tore down the elementary school. But at that time, it was useless, didn't need it. That one building became the high school and the elementary school. That's where I started high school, where I started I was before high school. But that was the Clark Summit High School. Then in 1950, the school districts got together. Waverly had their own school. We were talking about Waverly. They had their own school system. And they joined Clark Summit. South Abington had their own grade school down on Layton Road. And when Interstate 81 came through, they tore it down because they wanted the access to go through there. So another school was built there at South Abington eventually at the same time. Then in 1950, right after 1950, they built a school on the other side of the Grove Street Bridge. We talked about it here just a second ago. That became eventually the elementary center, which it is now. Built a new school up on Noble Road, up on the top of the hill, which became the senior high school. They built a school out in Newton Ransom. Now, Newton Ransom had their own school system, but they came and joined Clark Summit, Clark's Green, along with Waverly, to eventually combine to the Abington Heights School District. Now, they had a middle school out in Newton Ransom, which is still there. So you can see they started with about eight students in a rented room probably initially, back in 1886, and how it's graduated today to one of the finest school districts in Pennsylvania. And I think I'm correct when I say that. It's certainly rated very, very, very high. But you think about when I went to school there was Clark Summit, there was Waverly, there was Benton Township, there was Newton Ransom, there was Nicholson, there was Scott Township, Factorville, and Dalton. There were 7, 8, they all had their own schools. And today they're all combined together, they merged together. Like Scott Township is now Lakeland, Factorville, Dalton, Nicholson became Lackawanna Trail, and the other ones joined in with Abington Heights. So it's a huge school district that began with so few people. It's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. My graduating class, and I graduated in, I shouldn't tell you this because you know how old I am, but I don't care. I graduated in 1950, and I only had 66 people in my class. Now, I think Abington Heights this year is going to graduate close to 400 people. So you can see how the growth of the education has taken place over the years. And the kids have always wanted, the families have always wanted their children to be well educated, and it continues that way. let me just throw a couple things out to you about growing up in Clark Summit. I came to Clark Summit when I was probably 11 years old. And if you wanted to do anything in Clark Summit, there was two ways you could get around to do it. You could walk or you could ride your bike. There was nobody to take you any place at all. And that reverts back to today with the busing that we have. I got stuck on Newton Ransom Boulevard this last week when the school was letting out, the middle school. And I sat there and I waited and waited. And so I counted all the school buses that were coming out of the middle school. And I lost count with 32. 32 buses came out of there at that time. And I had to wait. Now you figure, I don't know what a school bus holds, 40 people maybe? So you got, 1,200 kids? Am I right on that? Did I get it right? Something like that? That's a lot of children that you get out of there every day. But kids bus today, and I get back to what it was when I was young growing up, to take a bike and ride to Waverly, because the Waverly Community House had a wonderful basketball court. Not that we didn't have a good one in Clark Summit, but it was not always available. So you'd ride your bike all the way to Waverly, and then you'd ride it back so when you had to walk the hill to get back to Clark Summit. So that's how we traversed there in those days. We had a movie theater. What was the name of that first theater? The Aljo? Aljo? Okay. That burned down. They had no movie theater. In 1950, 51, Comerford built the movie theater in Clark Summit. Great. Saturdays, double feature, 25 cents. You could spend the whole afternoon there and watch the movies. Yeah, that was entertainment for us. And in time, if you wanted to go to Scranton, the Mart's Bus Company had a commuter bus. And they ran every hour on the hour from Clark Summit to Scranton, and 10 minutes after the hour to come back. So you always had a commuter bus that gets you to Scranton, gets you back. You could go down to the movies and have a good time. That was always entertainment for us, and we found our way around like that. If you missed the bus in Clark Summit, you could walk up to Clark's Green and get what they called the Fleetville Flyer. It was an old converted school bus that they had between Fleetville and Scranton to take care of those people up in Waverly in that Fleetville area. And some mornings, if you got on that bus, you'd probably find chickens and pigeons and all kinds of animals in the back of the bus because they're taking them down to take them down to the produce places. Sleigh riding was a big deal. If you've ever been to Clark Summit, it's a lot of hills. And those hills were great for sleigh riding. You could start at the top and come around down to School Street. The Calendar Hill was on Fairview Road. It'd take you half a day to walk to the top, but it was a wonderful place to toboggan. And we found a lot of things to do with our time. We just didn't look around for things to get in trouble. As I said, we had basketball courts. There were always church functions. And I have to tell this story about a church when I mentioned the church. Clark Summit's always been a religious town. Wonderful Catholic church there, and I happened to be Methodist. And I was dating an Irish girl who belonged to Our Lady of Snows. And it was Christmas Eve, and they have a Christmas Eve Mass. They always had. And so she invited me to go with her. And I walked into Our Lady of Snows church, and I go, "You can't come in, buddy. You don't belong to this church." And as a young boy, it kind of shocked me a little bit that there was a problem like that back then. And I didn't get in. I didn't go to the church. Now today it's different. I could probably do it. I bring that up because that was a learning process for me. It was an education for me as I grew up in a small town of Clark Summit. And I always remember that. I like to close with some trivia. And I sat down. I worked on this. At one time, Clark Summit had 6 churches. There were 6 churches. Today, there's 5. So the churches haven't changed too much. Car dealers, new car dealers, it says they had 4. Today, there's none. There's no. If you want to buy a car in Clark Summit, you're going to have to go someplace other than Clark Summit to buy it because there's no car dealers there. Gas stations, we had 6 gas stations in the borough of Clark Summit. Today, we have 1. If you come to Clark Summit, you have to take a look at that one on State and Grove. That's the only one left, the gas stations. We had 4 barbers, and I figured out last night there's 3 barbers still in Clark Summit, so that's not too bad, not much of a change. The 5 hairdressers, Today there are 3 that my wife helped me out on this one. We had a taxi company, believe it or not. You had 2 or 3 taxis. Today there's no taxis. You know, they're out of business a long time. We had 2 banks. Today we have 3. So we grew financially. I figured that one out. There were 3 supermarkets in Clark Summit at one time. Today there's none. If you want to go to the supermarkets, you got to go down South Avenue Township, down to the shopping center. The movie theater's gone. There is no movie theater anymore like there was before. And lastly, and Charlie mentioned about this, the businesses, how important they were to a small town like Clark Summit. That was the strength, the small businesses kept the community going. The Bummel Hardware Company, it was established in 1911. It was over 100 years old, a couple years ago. It was managed by 4 generations of the Bummel family. And I think I can remember there's 5 boys. Mrs. Bummel always wanted a girl, but she never got one. It was George and Judd and John and Jim and Bill, 5 of them. And they all started their life, their career in the Bummel Hardware store. And it was a great place to go into if you're a bug about hardware and appliances and things like that. I used to love to go in, just to walk on the floors were all loaded with grease and everything. I'd been there a long, long time. It was kind of out of the history. Last year, George Bummel died. George was the last living. Well, his brother John is still alive, but he doesn't live closely. That was the last living Bummel that ran that little small store that was over 100 years old. And he turned it over to his son, Chip, George, when he got in failing health. And Chip got cancer and died. And then the daughter and the widow took over the Bummel Hardware, and they couldn't make it. You can't compete against Lowe's and Home Depot in a little store like that, or Dalton Do It Center and so forth. So now that store's closed and gone, it becomes Duffy's Coffee House. I guess that they're doing well. I've only been in there once. But what I'm leading up to is how things change in a small town, how important businesses are, how important education is, how important people that live there. I looked in the book the other night. In the 1980s, and I was on Borough Council for many, many years, I looked at the pictures. It was here. There was 10 of us on Borough Council. And today, as I stand here talking to you, there's only 2 of us left, and I have to be one of them. And that's kind of a scary thing when you think of the years going by. But we all try to do the best we can. And this is a history. The narrative, 177 pages. It's wonderful reading. And I'm glad I could come tonight, this afternoon, and speak to you about it. So thank you. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
You talked about how the school, the original school, 2 rooms, was rebuilt twice because it had burns. And I was wondering how it got expanded each time that it was rebuilt, because building the...
How the buildings changed from what it...
Pretty big now.
The school district was very progressive, men and women. I can't speak to them because I wasn't living, but they had a lot of ideas of how they wanted their children to be educated, how they wanted the school to be situated, and I guess they're the ones who put it all together on the map. They knew what they wanted to do.
No, I mean, how big did the building get each time?
Each time. Well, I can answer
house.
that. I have to go back and remember the last elementary school that was there. That room, they had 12 rooms in that school, and that was at the time division between high school and elementary. Then they closed that off for high school, built the new high school, which is the one that's standing there now. And that I'd say they probably had 20 rooms in there. So they expanded, got bigger and bigger and bigger. As their enrollment grew, they had to do that. They're good thinkers, I have to admit. Okay, thank you. Sarah, it's all yours.
Is there any other questions before we wrap up? All right, thank you again for coming. Our authors will be doing a signing in the front room, and come to the dining room, there are coffee and tea and snackies for you. Okay, so thank you again.
We're selling copies of the book. $15 apiece. Not that one.